What's up everyone, my name is Rosendo, welcome back to my channel, and we are back with another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at my Expression EP and breaking that down. It's also January now, so Happy New Year to anyone watching. My first video of the year. A few things I just want to quickly mention before we take a look at my EP. Number one, I'm starting to realize that YouTube is probably just my favorite source of content. I don't know if any of you follow me on places like TikTok, or even if you watch my YouTube shorts. But I'm starting to realize that, I've always been a fan of long form content. I pretty much grew up watching YouTube as well. So I'm really going to be kind of taking a shift more towards long-term videos and pretty much holding back on the shorts. Maybe I'll still upload a few shorts. And even if you're unaware, my shorts are actually just clips of my long form videos. But the point is this. The point is I've always been a fan of long form content. I enjoy long form content the most. So I'm going to be looking to put out pretty much almost all long form content in 2025. It's 2025 now. My goal is to hopefully maybe put out one video a week, which is a lot faster than I was before. So let me know if you guys have any ideas, anything you guys want to see. But I'm going to be taking a pretty big switch towards long form content. So definitely subscribe if you want to see more of that. Track breakdowns. I want to share some, a lot of characteristics. And I know I talk a lot about music with intention. I kind of want to share what that means and how I apply that to my music, how you can apply it to your music, some of the important themes and characteristics I see in electronic music and music production, and all that stuff. And yeah, that was the big one. Other thing is I know last time my mic was ringing a little bit. I still haven't figured out if it's an issue with my mic or with my audio interface itself. I might need to get one of them replaced. I don't think it's the cable. So if the mic is ringing, I apologize in advance. I'm going to see if I can figure it out and hopefully replace one of them. We'll just see, and if it rings, I'm sorry about that. All right, but enough said about that. Let's talk about my Expression EP. This Expression EP was the first EP that I released. It was intended to be released as an EP, not as an album. So it's 6 tracks. It's just under 30 minutes. And it's really meaningful to me. So there's a lot I want to break down about it. I really want to take a look at each track individually. Now, this is not going to be taking a look at the project files themselves. It's just meant to be a general overview of the EP itself, why I made it, each track, why I made each track, and kind of the themes and ideas represented in each track and why they're so meaningful. So without further ado, let's take a look at my EP. All right, so we are in Spotify taking a look at my EP. All right, now Expression was the result of watching all sorts of media in 2024, a combination of TV shows and movies, specifically in the winter of 2024. Let's call it, winter 2023, 2024, around the months of maybe November or so to February. Now, obviously, I didn't make the whole EP in that time, but, watching TV shows and watching movies throughout that period inspired 6 of these tracks, except for intro, but we'll talk about that. So 5 of these tracks. And the whole Expression EP kind of is meant to capture that mood of kind of the winter mood where, it gets dark early, it's a little bit cold outside. So the EP is pretty emotional, it's pretty melodic. And one of the reasons it's so meaningful is because it's a step in that direction of the artists that I talk about that I really like, things like Porter Robinson, Seven Lions, Millennium. And this EP was definitely meant to portray that and capture that sound and really capture the type of music I wanted to portray and essentially portray my sound. Because I know up to this point, I've made all sorts of genres. You can take a look at exposition and things like that, but let's take a look at progress, release, call. They all have their very different, express. They all have very different styles and very different kind of moods. And even though they have similar elements, the super saws, the pads, the atmospheric elements, they're not really the same. They don't really capture my sound in the same way that something like this does. I think Expression is the perfect kind of debut to really understanding my sound. When you look at tracks like Empty and Alone, Journey Beyond, even something like Intro. But these are all long tracks, all focused on emotion, intention, expression, progression, pretty much all the elements, all the characteristics that I vouch for all the time, and all the characteristics that I talk about and try to include in my tracks. Now, each track is designed to represent a very clear idea, feeling, or theme. And the whole reason the EP is named Expression is because a lot of the times they're just kind of taking emotions and kind of telling stories in a way that a lot of artists don't do. Now, I know a lot of artists include emotion, but not in the same way that I think these tracks do, the same way that they express something, some feeling, some story. And I won't get into the too specific details on each track, but I will give you a general overview of why I made them and what they're trying to get across. And last thing I'll say about this is, again, it really is just meant to kind of take a dive into the sound I want to recreate, especially something when you take a look at like Worlds by Porter Robinson, which is probably it is my favorite album, and I don't know if it'll ever be topped, at least right now. But this is really just meant to take a step in that direction when you get something very melodic, very nostalgic, almost sounds like it's otherworldly, a little bit dystopian in a way. This is what that EP is meant to represent, which is why I called it Expression. It's really just meant to get some emotion out of you, out of the listener, out of the producer, out of myself who made this. And especially given the artwork that I absolutely love. I'll tag the artist that I work with. I just found him on Fiverr. Absolutely love this artwork. I really think it captures everything of that I like, all the feelings, the colors, especially just kind of with the character right in the middle. So I love that. But in any case, let's take a look at the EP itself, each track at a time. All right, so we're going to be starting with intro here. Now, again, I won't get into the gory details of each track, but I will give you an overview of why I made them and why they're important to the EP. Now, intro is the rare exception to this track because intro is the only track that I didn't have any real inspiration from a TV show or a movie, and B, it should have been, I believe it's the last track I actually made. I made all of these other tracks, and intro was the last one that came to me. And if you'll notice, it's called Intro 01, and the kind of idea there is that as I make more albums, and if I want to include intros into those, and I can just keep labeling them as different intros. I like just the word intro, it serves the purpose. I know I definitely have 2 albums in mind right now that I definitely want to make. I think I had a third one that I don't really remember. So it just leaves the door open for more work and more intros if I decide to include them in those albums. Now, as far as the track itself goes, the interesting thing here is that I'm pretty sure intro is the only track, at least that I've made, I want to say, that the idea just came to me while in my head. I remember it was the winter, and I was just walking outside. It was a little cold, it was dark, and I was thinking, I'd already made the other tracks, and I was thinking, I need an intro to this EP. What should I do? And as I'm walking, I just hear that melody or that harmony come into my head that goes dun dun up down, and I'm just repeating it into my head. And the second I got back to my place, I just put it in my DAW. And that's how intro was born. Now, in a much more general sense, let's talk about the track, because intro does something really nice that I like that you'll probably start to hear right around here. The whole point of intro is this. Now, the EP itself is meant to be somewhat minimalistic in the sense that I didn't really care too much to fill it in with effects and sweeps and atmospheres and transitions and all that stuff and risers and all that stuff. The emphasis on the EP was expression, and not just expression, but intention and the stories you're telling and what type of path you can take, the progression and all that stuff. It was never meant to be big on the sound design or filling it in and make it super commercial and all that stuff. So intro serves a very important purpose, and it was designed to serve this purpose. Let's talk about that. Intro was designed to just kind of ask the listener, and I produced it this way, to ask the listener to just take a listen and really observe the decisions that the producer is making. Because if you listen to the track, it's the same drums, the same synth, just presented in different patterns. Intro is actually the first track. I believe intro is 90 BPM. It might be 100. It's the first track that has this offbeat kick pattern that I really like, where it goes kick, snare, kick, snare. That's a pattern that I really like, but I haven't included it in any of my tracks. And the reason I mentioned that is because intro asks the listener to just listen to the variation in patterns, right? It's not that complex of a track as far as the sound design and changes go, as far as kind of musical changes, effects and all that stuff. But it has a lot of rhythmic change. And again, the point of that is for you to consider that there's basically 3 ways this track could have gone. You hear the second pattern right here where the synths are more split up and there's a little bit of gaps. And near the end, everything is consistent, right? You have the on-beat kick and snare, 4 on the floor type beat. And the difference there is that it's the same sounds presented in a different way. So all I'm really doing is trying to show that the producer really has the ability to make whatever decisions they want in the track. And even if you have the same sounds, you can take them in many different ways. It's not just about the sounds you use and how filled in the track you can make it, but every decision you make has an impact. Every decision you make is important, which is why in this track, I could have gone one way, I could have gone the other. I'm just demonstrating that you have limitless opportunities. So it's really asking the listener to consider that, well, why did the producer do this? Why is the producer trying to do this? Maybe it's not just about the sounds and how filled and how cool you can make the track sound. Maybe it's about the decisions the producer make. Maybe it's about why the producer did something. Maybe it's about what they're trying to accomplish when they do those things, which is why I like the intro to set up the rest of the track as almost more of a just to keep that thought in your head. Not so much to what am I going to listen to? Is it going to be, groovy? Is it going to be filled? Is it going to have a lot of big drops and things? It's asking you to think about the decisions the producer is making and why they did that, and realizing that, hey, the producer went this way specifically, probably for a reason. Now, last thing I'll say about this track is that I really like the sounds. I don't think it's absolutely perfect, but The big super saws do a good job of kind of defining the sound, defining the mood. They're a little bit harsh and they get a little bit dark, which just kind of fits with the EP and the whole winter feeling, especially if you're outside, you know, the winter air is there. But it definitely made sense to end it on a little bit more emotional sense where it slows down, it calms down a little bit, you get the soft piano, and the strings come in, which I absolutely love strings. If you've seen these videos, I just can't help myself but not use strings. I'm sorry, I can't help myself to use strings. But it slows down a little bit and it really just does a nice transition to the heart of the EP. All right, moving on to track number 2, we have Empty and Alone. And as you see right here, these are all very long tracks. That's the whole, not the whole point, but that's one of the things that I like about this EP is I love long tracks. I think long tracks are just awesome. So, I mean, we have 3 minutes. That's intro. We have 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. Even 4:33 is long. To me, that's short. We'll talk about why this track is on the shorter end. And then you have 6 minutes to finish up the EP. So I really like that part of the EP, which is why I'm asking you to focus more on the decisions and the progress instead of the actual sound design. All right, now the first big track on this EP is Empty and Alone. Real quick, I really like this track. I think it might be on my top of the EP. I think it might be in some ways the most important track of the EP. Not necessarily important, but in some ways my favorite track of the EP, but in other ways I have other favorites. The reason I say that is because Empty and Alone, I think, captures the sound I want to portray and the feelings I want to portray in the EP perfectly. It has, if you haven't listened to the EP, then go ahead and take a listen to it if you haven't. Again, this is just meant to be a broad overview. It has the mood I'm looking for that's a little bit dark and just feels a little bit cold, just like the winter. It has a little bit more of an emotional beat to it, and it has the big super saws at the end that just kind of go for the big sound and the big the sound that I like, the electronic sound that I like. So in some ways, Empty and Alone is one of my favorite tracks and one of the important tracks in here. I think it just captures the EP perfectly. It might be kind of maybe just the primary track of the EP. Now, as far as the track itself, Empty and Alone is essentially captures that. It captures that feeling of being a little bit empty in the winter and being a little bit just kind of feeling a little lonely, especially in those winter months that when this EP was made. And there's a lot more I could say about this track, but remember that each track is inspired by a specific either TV show or movie that I saw that presumably also shares these feelings of, in this case, being empty and alone. In some other cases, they're a little bit more vague. This one's a little bit more specific, but that's beside the point. The point is I really like this track. It's 5 minutes and 16 seconds, and it captures a lot of things I really like. It has a nice melody. It has the super saws. It goes into this kind of slow down point, and then this beat is something that I've kind of never really experimented with that much. This is a nice part of the track where you think it's going to go one way because you have these big super saws right here, and the first drop is just it's just a little bit more calm, a little bit more relaxed, and it has the attention on the melody with all these drums and fills on the side. So I really like this part. I think it does a good job of getting that feeling and ending it with the super saws. I think it's just fantastic with the same melody, with a much bigger drop that you had earlier, and it captures a lot of things that I like really nicely. Now next we have Betrayal. Betrayal probably tells the best story out of all of the tracks on my EP. I don't necessarily think it's the most complete, but I think it tells the best story out of all of them. Now Betrayal was inspired by, again, I mentioned this whole EP is inspired by TV shows and movies. Betrayal essentially is inspired by watching a movie or watching a TV show where a TV show or movie that you really like, that you really want to end one way, and then the whoever it is, the writer, the director, the author, decides to just take a complete 180 and ends it in a way that you really, really don't like. Now, I'm sure all of us can think of a TV show or a movie that end this way. I know one comes to mind to me, but that's the whole point of the track. The whole point of the track is the track goes in one direction and then it betrays you and ends in a direction that you really don't think it should end, where it almost feels like, you know, the author or the writer betrayed you in that sense. So if you listen to the track, it starts with this really, well, first of all, it starts a little bit kind of slow, almost a little bit dark. You have this piano that's going all over the place and it gets taken away. And the build-up itself is a little bit mysterious. It has this dark and kind of dark mood to it, and then you really get these fills that make it a little bit strange, and you don't know where you're going until you get this nice, beautiful drop that gets interrupted with these kind of darkened sounds and these bass sounds, you know, growls and bass effects and things like that. And after it gets interrupted, it just really lets you appreciate the beauty that is the drop right here. And it kind of puts all that to the side. It's asking you to forget all those things that you just heard because you're really listening to something beautiful here. You keep getting interrupted a little bit more. There's still some sense that there's something that you don't want coming. And then the whole track allows you to appreciate the beauty one more time until it really just takes a 180 and goes in another direction. And that's why I like this part of the drop. That's the story it's trying to tell. It's about taking one track that's going one way and just completely switching it, where it feels like you're betraying your audience. Now you get into some nice drops, some nice fills here. Sorry, some nice kind of breakdowns, verses I like to call them. And the second buildup is a little bit more minimalistic. It has some nice chord movement to it, where the whole point of the track, the whole point of Betrayal, is that when you get this nice, beautiful drop over here, and it betrays you into something that you don't like, something we're gonna in this context call disgusting. At the end, what it does is it resolves that emotion. Is that after you heard that, after you've been betrayed, it ultimately gives you what you wanted in the first place, which is why you get this buildup right here. You get the bass growl one more time to make you think you're going in one way, but it resolves that emotion and gives you exactly what you want. It gives you precisely what you wanted by giving you the full drop, which is why there's no change from the second drop begins to the end of the track. It's the same drop. All it's doing is letting you appreciate it in its fullness, letting you really listen to it and just absorb it without being betrayed, without, it's giving you essentially what you wanted, what you should have had, what the audience maybe even deserves in the first place. So that's why I really like this track. That's why I think it tells the best story. And that's why I included it in this EP. Now up next, we have Twilight. Twilight might actually be my favorite track. It's actually my second favorite track in the EP. And Twilight is, in a lot of ways, the most, almost the most complete track. I like to think it might even be the most commercial track, but I really like this track. It just captures a lot of the sounds I really like. I believe it's 128 BPM. And there's not much to say here other than the fact that you have a lot of this movement and rhythm that I really like. The whole point of Twilight is to capture that feeling of twilight where, the sun's just starting to go down. It's starting to get dark, but there's still a little bit of light in the sky. And Twilight is pretty much the perfect song just for driving windows down, listening to this, while it's just starting to get dark. So it has some nice super saws, a really nice melody to it. It gets you the buildup, and the drop just starts by going and giving you that kick and giving you that rhythm and just, really just moving forward. It doesn't give you the super saws that you heard here, right here, just yet, but it allows you to listen to the pads, listen to the atmosphere, and then it delivers a powerful drop with a really nice melody. So I really like the super sauce here. I really like the bass. I really like the melody. That's why I think this might be one of my favorite tracks. I think those three elements all work together really, really well. The chords, the melody, and the bass, with the kick as well. They all just work really nicely. Now, as far as the story being told in Twilight, Twilight is about one thing. It's about two, let's fast forward a little bit. Because if you notice over here, we had one pretty clear melody right here. We had one pretty clear melody. In the second half of the track, we actually get two melodies right here. There we go. We get two melodies. And the whole story that Twilight's trying to tell is it's about two melodies in this case that are kind of moving around each other. You can hear they're moving in different directions. And it's about two melodies taking kind of two different paths and just moving around each other, but never really meeting. And that whole story is being told throughout this whole second half of the track, where these two melodies are moving, they're kind of doing different things, and you still get the fullness of the super saws, the fullness of the bass, and some really nice melodies to your ear. And what ends up happening is these melodies are kind of moving around each other, and at the end they start to come together a little bit closer and closer until finally they converge at the end. So that's the story being told in Twilight. That's what you can listen to if you're listening to the track. And that's one of the reasons I really like this. It has nice synths, nice melody, nice bass, and it has a nice feeling, again, the feeling of Twilight, and it has a nice story to it. Twilight is definitely one of my favorite tracks on this EP. All right, and up next we have Case Chords. Now, Case Chords is an interesting one because it's other than Intro, it's the shortest track on the EP. 4 minutes and 33 in my eyes is pretty short. Now, the reason that Case Chords is so interesting is two things. Number one, I really like the mood of it. I really like the feeling of it. It's really kind of slow and really emotional, especially with these chords. The whole focus is on the chords. And then you get kind of this super saw over here that introduces, again, still that dark, that winter feeling to it, that cold air feeling to it when it's dark outside. And it goes back to the piano, it goes back to the chords. and gives you kind of that spacey chords over here, the super saws that take up a lot of space, and it really captures that feeling nicely. The second reason case chords is important, and this is probably the main focus of this track, not necessarily focus, but the main kind of main feature of this track, I'll say, is that case chords is an interesting exception to my tracks, where in the context of the EP, this makes sense. Case chords starts with a drop right here, where the kick and snare come in, and it's a shorter track because it's pretty sustained in energy. The energy, the movement, the rhythm is pretty constant throughout. A lot of times my tracks have a lot of progression where they have there's high points, their low points, they drop down, the drums go away, the synths come in, the drums come back, or they do whatever. Case chords is the exception to that, and in the context of the EP, it makes sense. After the kick and the snare come in and the drop, right around here, they never go away, which is something I don't do all that often. And this is something I hear a lot of EPs and albums, maybe not EPs, but in general, a lot of artists make when they make longer works, is that they'll have a track that's a little bit more constant in energy. There's not a lot of movement, but it just has, it's almost like a filler in a way, where you get the feeling, you get the emotion that you're trying to get across, but the drums are constant. The energy is there. They don't change all that much. Over here, the drums are still there. We just take the super saws away a little bit. The melody goes away a little bit, and it just keeps moving forward. It has no real ups and downs. It has energy ups and downs, but the whole thing is just meant to be a constant stream of music where the drums don't go away. You get the drop again, and it really does a good sense in that regard, where it's the second to last track. It's the penultimate track, and it's a little bit more almost like an intermission, but not necessarily. It's just that consistent energy that gives you just enough of a break from the progression that you had and all over the place. Twilight, Betrayal didn't have as much progression. Twilight, Empty and Alone, and I thought I was missing one, but I'm not. Twilight and Empty and Alone. And Journey Beyond has the biggest progression, but even Betrayal has quite a bit of progression. So it gives you a little bit of a break from that, and just keeps things pretty constant, pretty steady before the final track of the EP. Now, finally, we have Journey Beyond. Now, Journey Beyond actually is my favorite track of the EP, and there's two reasons for this. Technically three. Let's start with the first and most important one. Now, Journey Beyond was the last track that I made in the EP. It's the last track that I seriously worked on, because most of these tracks were created right around the same time. Empty and Alone was pretty much the first track that was created. It was actually kind of inspired by another track I made that had a similar feeling, but I didn't really like. So I kind of took the same feeling, but started a new track with it. And more or less, with the exception of Intro, which was probably made around the end, more or less, these tracks were made in this order, and they were kind of worked on in that order. So Empty and Alone had a pretty complete outline before Journey Beyond had a very rough outline, is what I'm getting at. So Empty and Alone was made, let's say arbitrarily let's say making up numbers, it was 40% done. And then I had Betrayal, which was 30% done, and then Twilight, 20% done, and then Case Chords, 10, Journey Beyond, 10, something like that. And then after that, I had to work on them in that order. The point I'm getting at is this. Journey Beyond is the last track that I seriously worked on, and it shows in the mixing sense. I think it's very well mixed. Maybe it's not perfectly mixed, but because it's the last track I worked on, my mixing skills were a lot better, and I was able to mix it, and not only mix it, but produce it, because it was still very, very rough, a very rough outline. I was able to produce it really well from the almost beginning to end, and I think it shows. I think it came out very clearly produced better. Some of these other tracks aren't produced all that bad, but Journey Beyond definitely has an edge just because I made it later, just because my skills were better, and I was able to make it a little bit more complete track from a mixing perspective. So it definitely sounds better in that sense. So that's one of the reasons that this track is one of my favorites. The second reason this track is one of my favorites is because there's so many reasons, but it does a lot of the things. It does a lot of things well. Something like Betrayal doesn't have a big focus on the melody, neither does something like Intro. Neither does something like Case Chords in a way, which is why I really like Empty and Alone and Twilight. But Journey Beyond has all the elements I like. It has nice synths, it has nice bass, it has a nice melody. So that's one of the other reasons I really like this track. It's long, it has a great progression, it's 6 minutes, the progression is great. And finally, it's also a little bit more orchestral and a little bit more cinematic, which I really, really like. I like orchestral elements, I like things like movie scores. So the fact that it includes something similar to that type of feeling is something that I really like about this track. Now, the story being told here and the feeling being portrayed is really just like a journey. Again, this is inspired by a very specific piece of media, and if you just listen to the track, it's almost like it's telling a similar story where it has its ups, it has its downs. It's a little bit harsh in some places, it's a little bit dark, it's a little bit mysterious in some places. And the whole thing is a very, very nice journey into, it's a 6-minute journey that takes you all over the place. You know, right here, that impact gets a little bit dark. I really like this build up right here. And then you get a drop that doesn't have a kick on every beat. It's a little bit more spaced, but all the elements really work well together. You know, as you heard over here, I can't find the exact spot, but you had some crashes over here that kind of slow the track down. You bring those crashes back over here, and you just keep going forward with a journey where you get some elements. It's a little bit more intense. It's a little bit more full, and you get a little bit more orchestral right here. And you have these elements, you have these drums until you bring it back down into that dark buildup one more time, into finally a halftime drop. And I think this is the first halftime drop I've made in my tracks. So I really like this ending. It has the melody. The strings, I believe, come back in a second, and then the pad, or they're already there, and then the pad, the wide pad comes in to fill up some space. And I also really, really like the outro of this track. I spent quite a bit of time dialing in these strings. So I really like the movement that they take. I really like the chord progression. And I really like the outro of this track. Again, I think it does a lot of things well. A little bit cinematic, has a great progression and a great journey in the track itself. I like the elements I chose, and because it's mixed so well, I just think it does a really good job. This might be my favorite track, and it's also a track I'm very proud of. I think I did a really good job on this track because of all those things I just mentioned. So Journey Beyond, I think, just might be my favorite track of the EP. All right, and that is about it. Let me know what you guys thought. Let me know which tracks you guys like, if there's any tracks you guys don't like, what you think about the stories being told. Again, each track is inspired by a very specific piece of work, whether they're emotional, whether they're not emotional. Those similar feelings were captured in these tracks. To me, one of them is painfully obvious, and kind of two of them are a little bit more obvious. The other ones are a little bit more vague. They just capture similar feelings and feelings I felt while watching them. So it's not really meant for you guys to guess. But two of them I think are again, to me, painfully obvious. To everyone else, it's probably just not obvious. Maybe it's a little bit discreet. If you guys guess what they're based off of, maybe I'll confirm, maybe I won't. But again, the whole point is that they're inspired by specific pieces. And last thing I'll say is there's a lot more I could say about these tracks. There's a lot more intention and a lot more emotion that went into these tracks. But I don't want to talk too much about that just yet. Not that I want to hold back and hold secrets, but there's just so much that went to this track that I really think it deserves kind of a bigger platform to talk about these things. So I think it makes sense to give you guys a general overview, but I don't want to go into too specific detail because there's so much that went into these tracks. There's so many things that I could talk about, and I don't want to talk about them just yet. I really think I can maybe hold off until I could talk about them in a more complete way, until the story makes a lot more sense. So there's a lot more to them, but for now, I just gave you guys a general overview. All right, and that's about it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, let me know if you have any video ideas in the comments, because I'm looking to be posting one video a week within reason. If I'm out of town, if I have other things to do, obviously I won't get to that, but that's something I seriously want to do this year. So this year is going to have a lot of long form content. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, if that's your thing. We're going to be talking about all things production, a lot of concept based. Again, I'm not a big sound design person, but I like making decisions. I like making things with intention. So I want to be talking about a lot of concepts here about music production and DJing. So definitely stick around if you're interested in some of that. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.